Charlie Renaldo Ortega, the man from El Salvador. El Salvador suffered during a 12-year civil war, and when it was over, 75,000 had been killed. In the 1970s, discontent with social inequalities, a poor economy and the repressive measures of dictatorship, the inevitable was fulfilled. Since 1961, the right-wing Conciliation Party ruled and there was not much love for human rights. The leftist anti-government guerrilla units, whose leading group was the Farabundo Marti National Liberation Front, engaged in many fights. When the United States intervened, it sided with the military dictatorship, even though human rights violations were on the rise. Between 1979 and 1981, about 30,000 people were killed by right-wing death squads backed by the military, and to many, it was not a surprise. In the early 1970s, a Japanese firm decided to invest in El Salvador, thus stimulating the economy and providing jobs to many of the local residents. In order for the company to operate without much interference from the government, they had agreed upon a partnership, in which they thought made very good business sense. Charlie Renaldo Ortega was 17 years old when he got hired by this new company in town, and for almost 10 years, he was able to excel. He worked as a forklift driver and had a promising future in which he was able to live exceptionally well. Participation in the protests. Prior to going to work for this Japanese company, Charlie Renaldo was a rebellious teenager who was much involved in a revolution that wanted to get the country on the right course. He had witnessed many of his comrades shot and killed, all because they preferred a different choice. On one occasion, Charlie Renaldo and a female companion were attending a rally where some of the protesters were gathering in a cathedral, in which they thought would be a perfect sanctuary. When the right-wing soldiers, along with members of the death squads, arrived on the scene, it became very scary. They began firing upon the protesters that were outside the cathedral, and they were dropping to their death like slaughtered cattle. A majority of the protesters were not armed, so it couldn't have been much of a battle. As the soldiers made their way inside the cathedral, they didn't hold back on the gunfire and people continued to die. With an opportunity to escape the massacre, Charlie Renaldo and his companion ran for safety, while avoiding and sometimes stepping on dead bodies they passed by. In another instance, Charlie Renaldo and his companion were attending a rally, and out of nowhere, a military helicopter arrived on the scene and started spraying bullets into the crowd. Once again, he witnessed death around him, and many of those that were injured cried out loud. About 2 years before going to work for this Japanese firm, Charlie Renaldo met and fell in love with this woman named Pizarro, first name Guadalupe. After dating for a brief period, they got married, and very soon after, 4 children came their way. Their names were Maria, Rosalinda, Charlie Renaldo Jr. and Ricardo, who was the youngest of the siblings of 4. With a family to support now, Charlie Renaldo could not afford to actively participate in the protests and rallies anymore. Target of suspicion. After a few years on the job, Charlie Renaldo would be promoted to a league man position, and his future was looking very bright. Although he accepted his new role in the company, Charlie Renaldo felt that he and his fellow employees weren't being treated right. As time progressed, management in the company were beginning to suspect that Charlie Renaldo and a few other employees were contemplating a strike. Because they didn't have concrete proof to justify their suspicion, one of the managers tried to befriend Charlie Renaldo and to inquire what about the company they didn't like. In the beginning, Charlie Renaldo was hesitant to share his thoughts, but when the manager started talking about how bad the working conditions were, he began to trust. Unknowingly to Charlie Renaldo at the time, the manager was a company spy whose sole purpose was to identify the potential troublemakers, because it was an absolute must. One day, while at work, the manager suggested to Charlie Renaldo that he set up a meeting at his home and invite all that would be interested in making a change. Thinking that it was a good idea, Charlie Renaldo told the manager that the following day, he would arrange. Several people showed up for the meeting, and the manager was also there to see and hear. The gathering was conducted in such an organized manner that all the issues of concern were brought out into the clear. A few days after the meeting at Charlie Rinaldo's home, several people were fired, including Charlie Rinaldo, the league man. As a result of their sudden dismissal, there was no compensation plan. There was no explanation as to why he was fired, and this really infuriated Charlie Rinaldo to a point of wanting to retaliate. Although he had money set aside for a rainy day, to find employment elsewhere, he could not afford to wait. The retaliation. A week or so after being fired, Charlie Rinaldo was talking with a friend who informed him that the manager that had befriended him was a company spy. It didn't take Charlie Rinaldo long to believe what he was hearing, and because of his dismissal, he now knew why. The friend also told Charlie Rinaldo that plans were already in place to settle the score. Because the friend was in a hurry, he chose not to tell Charlie Rinaldo anything more. The following day, there was word around the town that the manager was involved in a deadly attack. While opening the door to his home to accept a delivery, a rifle was fired, and the end result was the victim laying on his back. Unfortunately, the manager's son was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and he died instead. For weeks to follow, the manager went through much turmoil in his life, because it should have been him who was dead. He was so affected by his son's murder that he started drinking heavily, and in the company, he no longer had a voice. His wife constantly blamed him for the loss of their son, and eventually, they would divorce. Migrating to the United States. After being employed for about a year with a new company, Charlie Rinaldo began to desire of coming to the United States and starting a new life. He wanted to provide a brighter future for himself, his children, and his wife. With his mind made up, Charlie Rinaldo moved his family in with his mother-in-law, and he assured them that everything would work out. After setting up contacts in Mexico, purchasing his bus ticket, and kissing his family goodbye, Charlie Rinaldo was ready to see what the United States was all about. The 4,000-mile journey to Mexico City would take approximately 14 days. With $1,600 in his possession, along with a brown paper sack filled with a variety of pupusas and a suitcase of clothing, Charlie Rinaldo anxiously headed forward to the northern ways. Because the bus was his mode of transportation, Charlie Rinaldo encountered many stoppages in which the federal soldiers would come aboard. They would demand to see identification in order to determine whether or not you were trying to cut your country's umbilical cord. Luckily for Charlie Rinaldo, his papers were legit, and he was able to travel as far as Mexico City. Once he got to this destination, this is when he would get down to the real nitty-gritty. During his 14 days on several different buses, Charlie Rinaldo encounters a collection of incidents that touched him in various degrees. The passenger sitting beside him. While traveling through Guatemala, a young lady was sitting beside him, and out of the blue, she started rubbing on his knees. Charlie Rinaldo didn't know what to make of the situation, but he kindly told the lady that was enough. With her mouth glittering with aluminum, she asked Charlie Rinaldo if he was interested in trying out her precious stuff. He declined her offer and then pulled out the brown paper sack that was filled with pupusas in the flavor of beef, chicken, and fish. Charlie Rinaldo asked the lady if she was hungry, and she responded by saying that she wasn't fond of that particular dish. She then asked Charlie Rinaldo if, in that brown paper bag, were there any Kentucky Fried Chicken. Suddenly, the lady extended all 8 of her fingers, including the 2 thumbs, and commenced to licking. It didn't take Charlie Rinaldo long to realize that he was dealing with a nutcase. Beginning to feel uncomfortable with the lady sitting beside him, Charlie Rinaldo kindly asked the lady to give him some space. As the lady observed him eating on the pupusa, she was beginning to have a change of heart, and before she would get up to leave, she asked to try a piece. Just so she would know what she was about to eat, Charlie Rinaldo explained to her what the pupusa was, and he also made a point to let her know that it wasn't cooked in grease. He told her that the pupusa was the most notable dish in El Salvador, which is a thick hand-made corn tortilla, which is filled with a choice of cheese, refried beans, shrimp, or a particular meat. While Charlie Rinaldo was explaining the pupusa, the lady bit into one and the expression on her face was an indication that it was a good eat. After all was said and done, she had eaten 6 pupusas and drunk 3 cups of chuco, which is a Salvadorian drink made from purple corn. It is made by soaking the corn in water, blending it, cooking it over a medium fire, and once it thickens, the chuco is born. There are other ingredients needed, so give me a minute while I think. Toasted pumpkin seeds and boiled beans are added to the drink. As the lady was getting up to leave, Charlie Rinaldo had a change of mind and asked her to stay. During the bus ride through Guatemala, they got to know each other a little better, and one late night, Charlie Rinaldo had his way. When he had awakened the following morning, the lady was nowhere to be found, but she had left him a note. She had informed Charlie Rinaldo that she enjoyed his company, and that was all she had wrote. Arriving in Mexico. After 2 weeks of the long bus ride, Charlie Rinaldo had finally reached his destination, and he was one happy Salvadorian brother. While in Mexico, arrangements had already been made for him to meet a friend of his mother. This friend would provide him with all the necessities in order for him to head further up north to the United States border. The mode of transportation, food, and the coyotes were all in order. Once the coyotes were paid a fee of $300, they took Charlie Rinaldo and 4 other clients to Tijuana, Mexico, where the crossing would be staged. The coyotes were very experienced and organized in carrying out their duties, because, on many occasions, they had engaged. After arriving in Tijuana, the coyotes wasted no time, and across the border, they would advance. Unfortunately for the coyotes, along with their human cargo, they were apprehended by border patrol agents with the assistance of technology that had been enhanced. Not wanting to be deported back to El Salvador, Charlie Rinaldo told the agents that he was a Mexican national, and he had hoped they would believe him. By the end of the day, he was escorted back across the border along with the rest of them. A successful border crossing. A day or so later, the coyotes were at it again, and they were cautious as ever before. After walking through the open terrain of the U.S. side of the border for most of the night, the coyotes allowed the group to rest, because some of their feet were sore. Also at this time, they were fed some flour and corn tortillas with some refried beans. Because of the torn clothes they had on, they were each given 2 pairs of Calvin Klein blue jeans. On the final leg of the journey, Charlie Rinaldo and the 4 other prosperity seekers were stowed away in a truck and successfully made it to a safe house, where they would be allowed to make that pick-me-up call. On several attempts, Charlie Rinaldo tried to make contact, and in every case, he got nothing at all. Not wanting to leave Charlie Rinaldo all alone in the streets of San Diego, California, the coyotes found him somewhere to stay. The place was littered with trash and wasn't fit for a dog to run around and play. The owner of the house was a Mexican national who benefited from people like Charlie Rinaldo, who had come to a dead end. In order for Charlie Rinaldo to have a limited stay with him, $200 he would have to spend. Not used to living in such unsanitary conditions, Charlie Rinaldo reluctantly accepted the deal. For about a week or so, he had to endure the smell of stench from all kinds of sources, and it was definitely not a good feel. There were rats and roaches in every corner of the house, and their pregnancy rate was very high. To the owner of the house, who was always drunk, they were like pets that had the freedom to randomly multiply. Meeting a fellow Salvadorian. After meeting a native Salvadorian lady at a corner bar, Charlie Rinaldo was persuaded to move to the Los Angeles area of the state. Within a week of coming to Los Angeles, he found temporary work, and the cost of rent where he would reside was at a very cheap rate. The room was unfurnished, but little by little, pieces of furniture he would buy or find. For a few weeks, he was without a bed, and sleeping on the hard floor was doing no justice to his behind. When Charlie Rinaldo would invite the Salvadorian lady over for a Corona, or a shot of tequila, he would often apologize for the empty house. When they both would get a little bit drunk, he would fool around with her low-cut blouse. After a month or so of interacting with one another, the Salvadorian lady decided to take Charlie Rinaldo on a shopping spree. From yard sales, garage sales to the flea market, they would search for bargains that were very close to the price of free. Charlie Rinaldo was so intrigued from bargain hunting that within a few weeks, his apartment was furnished all the way through. He was finally able to take his mattress off the floor and provide it with a headboard, even though it was held together with super glue. The couch that he found near a dumpster was missing all the pillows except for one. The chairs to the kitchen table didn't have back support, and the cushion in the seats, there were none. A blessing in disguise. One Saturday morning, Charlie Rinaldo decided to go in search of yard sales in the Baldwin Hills area of the city, because he desired some fancy stuff. As he walked around the area, he came upon the yard of a white lady, who was displaying all kinds of gadgets in the rough. There was one item in particularly that caught Charlie Rinaldo's attention, and it looked very nice. Doing his best to make a deal with the lady, when all was said and done, they still couldn't agree on a suitable price. The item that Charlie Rinaldo was interested in was a stuffed gorilla that resembled King Kong. The lady didn't speak Spanish and Charlie Rinaldo spoke little English, and because of that, it kept them moving along. As the two continued to try and understand one another, the lady's neighbor was passing by and she offered to translate. She spoke and understood Spanish very well, and for her to convey his wishes, Charlie Rinaldo thought that would be great. After everything had been settled, Charlie Rinaldo thanked the neighbor and they continued to hold a conversation in his native tongue. The neighbor's name was Linda, and she was an attractive young lady with brown hair that was very long. During their conversation, Charlie Rinaldo informed Linda that he was new in town and that he looked forward to improving his lifestyle. Even though they had just met, Linda offered him a job with respect to shipping out packages and materials she wanted him to file. Wasting no time, she led Charlie Rinaldo over to her home, which also served as her workplace. After showing him around and introducing him to Irene, the receptionist, Linda could see the joy in Charlie Rinaldo's face. A developing friendship. As the weeks passed by, Linda would notice qualities in Charlie Rinaldo that made her grateful in so many ways. Wanting to see him prosper and become an American citizen, she gave him a raise. Just like the receptionist had offered to do, Linda proposed to marry Charlie Rinaldo, so that he could become a legal resident. She wasn't a rich lady, but she did have money that she set aside to be spent. Linda was so trustworthy of Charlie Rinaldo that she would let him use her car for business and personal activities as well. Because Charlie Rinaldo wasn't all that fluent in English, she paid to have him take classes at UCLA. And he did that for a short spell. When Linda would go away on business trips, she would leave her keys to her Mercedes-Benz with Charlie Rinaldo, because he was her special man. While attending his English classes, he would sometimes drive up in the Mercedes knowing that his fellow classmates wouldn't understand. Working for Linda, Charlie Rinaldo didn't have to worry about having money in his pockets, and very often, it would be a large amount. Concerned for his safety with all that cash, Linda assisted Charlie Rinaldo in getting a credit card account. With a side job to make extra money, Charlie Rinaldo would chauffeur around some of the rich kids that Linda knew, because they were underage. Two of these kids were brothers and they went by the last name of Cage. One day out of the blue, Linda decided to buy Charlie Rinaldo a car, so she took him down to a dealership and told him to choose. Without hesitation, Charlie Rinaldo selected the first car he saw, because this golden opportunity he didn't want to lose. Although Charlie Rinaldo was 27 years of age, the joy that he displayed brought tears to Linda's eyes. She had no idea that he would react this way, and it really caught her by surprise. The seduction. If you hadn't noticed yet, Linda was not married, had no children, and was a businesswoman who was always on the move. Unknowingly to Charlie Rinaldo in the beginning, she was attracted to him and wanted to get it on with her groove. This attempt to get Charlie Rinaldo into her bed took place while they were on a business trip. It had been a long and tiresome day, and when it was over, they both retreated to their separate rooms and on some white wine, Linda would sip. Being that it was around dinner time, she would order room service and then call Charlie Rinaldo to see if he wanted to join her for a bite. Charlie Rinaldo accepted the invitation, and when he came down to Linda's room, it was a seductive sight. Immediately, Linda tried to make a move on Charlie Rinaldo, and to her surprise, he would resist. Charlie Rinaldo had too much respect for her, and he took the time to make sure she knew this. Without a doubt, he was physically affected, and if it had been someone else, he would have certainly gotten down. The lingerie that Linda had on was of pure silk, and it was complemented with a see-through gown. Although Charlie Rinaldo remained a gentleman, Linda continued to tease him all during the dinner course. When she would suck on a strawberry or lick on a banana, Charlie Rinaldo would temporarily lose his voice. When she would lean over the table to serve him something from the platter, he would find it quite difficult to look away. The strength he needed to maintain his composure, Charlie Rinaldo would silently pray. While eating on some hot fudge sundae, Linda intentionally allowed it to drip upon her breast, and then she asked Charlie Rinaldo to assist her in removing it. On the borderline of an arousal explosion, Charlie Rinaldo pleaded with Linda to quit. After an hour or so, she came to realize that what she had been doing was not right. After apologizing to Charlie Rinaldo, Linda said good night. Since he wasn't able to eat to satisfaction because of the tease, Charlie Rinaldo fixed him a plate to go. Once he was done eating, he began to reflect on the earlier show. Recently discovered facts. When Charlie Rinaldo first arrived in the United States, he had an older half-sister that was already residing. She assisted him the best she could, but in the long run, he was doing the sole providing. Being among the civil unrest in his native country instilled a bitterness in Charlie Rinaldo that would continue to increase. When he came to the United States, he wanted to join the military so this anger he could release. His sister did her best to discourage him, because she felt it would jeopardize his stay in the land of milk and honey. Taking the advice of his sister, he had a change of mind and instead continued to save his money. The family reunion. After 6 months of being in the United States, Charlie Rinaldo was now ready to bring over the love of his life. His children would have to come a little later, but right now, he was missing the love, as well as the lovemaking, from his wife. After paying the coyotes the necessary fee of $300, the process was now in place. Everything went as planned, and after 3 weeks, Charlie Rinaldo's wife, Guadalupe, were now face to face. For 40 days and 40 nights, they made up for lost time, and to both their surprise, not a baby was conceived. For the following months to come, Charlie Rinaldo paid the fees required, and he brought the rest of his family over to the States where they would be received. This would include his wife's 2 sisters and his 4 children that he missed very much. When they all were finally reunited, the joy and happiness from each of them really did have a special touch. The following weekend after their arrival, a fiesta was arranged in order for them to celebrate. Plenty of friends were invited, and for Linda to be there, Charlie Rinaldo and Guadalupe thought that would be great. The gifted child. After the kids were established and were comfortable in their new environment, they were enrolled in school where their education could be lifted. It was of a big surprise when Charlie Rinaldo and his wife was informed that their eldest daughter, Maria, was very gifted. At the age of 12, her intelligence level was above and beyond the kids in her group, and because of this, she was accelerated to a higher grade. From the way things were going up to this point, there was a strong possibility that Maria's college tuition would be paid. From what she had witnessed while living in El Salvador, Maria knew early in life what her profession would be. She wanted to be a doctor, and it was very obvious for everyone to see. After a strong performance through high school, Maria would receive a scholarship to attend UCLA. Because of the long and inconvenient bus ride from South Central, Charlie Renaldo bought Maria a used car to assist her along the way. He also went further into debt, so that she could live near the campus, and he provided her a credit card. Charlie Renaldo wanted the best for his daughter, but trying to keep up with the Joneses was very hard. Moving on to another job. Counting on Linda. When things were tight, Charlie Renaldo had that option to go to her, and she would always come through. One day, while at work, Linda called Charlie Renaldo into her office, and from the look on her face, he sort of knew. She told him that the business was shutting down, because it wasn't making money, but she had arranged for him to work for a close and personal friend. For the next 3 years, at this car dealership, employment, Charlie Renaldo would spend. The responsibility of moving cars around from one location to another was a step back for Charlie Renaldo, and so was the paycheck. If things didn't improve very shortly, he would be heading for a financial shipwreck. After being on the job for a month or so, word spread around that Charlie Renaldo was in need of more work. One day after having lunch, Charlie Renaldo was called to his boss' office and was offered the position of a dispatcher's clerk. He would train in that position for about a month, and then he would be left in charge. His basic responsibilities would be the coordination of vehicles that were small and large. Charlie Renaldo was now making money like he was accustomed to, but still, it wasn't enough. While taking on side jobs, he would engage in illegal and dishonest stuff. After 5 years with the car dealership, Charlie Renaldo and the rest of his co-workers were called into a meeting, where they received some bad news. Effective immediately, each one of their jobs, they would lose. This was a shock to everyone, and for the old man who owned the company, he thanked them for their services and then told them to have a good day. Shortly thereafter, the old man, along with several of the employees, started crying, and not another word, he would say. The marriage is falling apart. Within a month, Charlie Renaldo was able to find another job as a forklift driver, and the pay started off good. Also, his wife, Guadalupe, had started working at a department store in the neighborhood. In the early stages of her employment, she would give most of her paycheck to her husband, so that he could pay all the bills and such. As time went on and the distance between their love began to spread, she wouldn't give him as much. They both knew that their marriage was falling apart, and none of the children were blind. The eldest daughter, Maria, was affected the most, and that strong bond with her daddy had started to decline. When she graduated from college, Maria did find it in her heart to invite her father to the ceremony, even though she thought about it twice. For such a long time, she had always felt that her daddy was not treating her mother very nice. The affair. The unhappiness at home led Charlie Renaldo into an on-the-job romance. Although he was old enough to be her father, Charlie Renaldo and Lucinda decided to take a chance. What started off as a mutual attraction to one another grew into some hugging and kissing. Lucinda was a beautiful, single young lady who was willing to give Charlie Renaldo what he had been missing. Although she had never experienced a sexual encounter before, the smooth Hispanic rap from Charlie Renaldo made her ready. Lucinda was so deeply affected by him that she didn't care he was of 4 grown children, their daddy. Pregnant with Charlie Renaldo's baby. One day, while at work, Lucinda confronted Charlie Renaldo and told him that she lost her period and didn't know where it had went. In accepting the fact that he was going to be a daddy of another, Charlie Renaldo was of mixed feelings to a strong extent. For weeks, he pondered on how he was going to explain to his family about his sexual healings. This was a tough situation that would include several difficult dealings. Charlie interrupting. Due to me experiencing a major migraine, I'm gonna have to take a break.